My name is Noelle Okafor and I am 31 years old. Yesterday morning, a photographer from Forbes magazine knocked on my parents' front door in a suburb of Milwaukee, Wisconsin to take a photograph of the house where I grew up. Not because anything remarkable happened in that house, because nothing did, because the whole point of the photograph was contrast. The editors wanted a before and after. The small brick split level where Raymond and Gail Okafor raised their daughter and told her repeatedly, systematically, and without a shred of doubt that she would amount to nothing set against the life I actually built. The photographer was polite. He introduced himself. He explained that Forbes was running a feature on me in the next issue and wanted to include the house as part of my origin story. My mother opened the door in her bathrobe. My father was behind her in the hallway. The photographer said, "Your daughter Noelle asked us to include this location," and my mother's face did something I have never seen it do in 31 years. It went blank, completely blank, not angry, not proud, not confused, empty. The way a screen looks when the system behind it crashes and there's nothing left to display. My father stepped forward. He said, "What do you mean, Forbes?" The photographer said, "Your daughter is being featured as one of our 30 under 30 alumni who have built companies valued at over $100 million. He said it the way you say something you assume the other person already knows, casually, as a given. The way you'd say the sky is blue. Your daughter built a $100 million company. Obvious, settled, fact. My parents did not know. They had not known for years. They did not know because I had stopped telling them things a long time ago, because every time I told them something they found a way to make it smaller. And now a man with a camera and a Forbes lanyard was standing on their porch, making it impossible to make anything small ever again. But I need to take you back, way back, before the magazine and the company and the moment my mother's face went blank. I need to take you to a kitchen table in 1999 where a 6-year-old girl showed her father a drawing, and everything that went wrong in this family started with what he said next. Before we go any further, if you have ever shown someone something you made, something you were proud of, and watched them dismiss it, hit subscribe. Hit it right now. Because this story is about what happens when the person who dismisses you is the person who made you. And what happens when you build something so undeniable that the dismissal becomes the most expensive mistake they ever made. Drop your location in the comments. Tell me where you're hearing this from. I want to know where in the world this story is landing right now. The Okafor household in Brookfield, Wisconsin was run on a single operating principle, and that principle was caution. My father Raymond was an electrical engineer at a manufacturing firm. Steady job, steady income, steady man. Raymond Okafor did not take risks. He did not change lanes without signaling 3 seconds early. He did not order anything at a restaurant he hadn't ordered before. He did not deviate from the route between home and work even when there was construction and the detour would have saved 10 minutes. He drove through the construction, every time. Because the known path, even when it was worse, was better than the unknown path, even when it was better. This is important. I need you to understand this about my father because it explains everything that came after. Raymond was not a cruel man. He was not cold. He was not absent. He was present, consistently, predictably, relentlessly present. And his presence was a weather system, a permanent overcast, not stormy, not sunny, just gray. A steady gray that covered everything and let nothing grow too tall. My mother Gail was a radiology technician at a hospital in Wauwatosa. She worked 3 12-hour shifts a week. She was more expressive than my father, but her expressiveness operated within a narrow band. She could be warm. She could be funny. She could be affectionate in small bursts, a hug after school, a compliment on a test grade, a song she'd hum while making dinner. But the warmth always had a ceiling, and the ceiling was my father's approval. Gail did not disagree with Raymond. Not about finances, not about parenting, not about the fundamental thesis of their household, which was that life was a series of risks to be avoided and that the highest aspiration any person could have was stability, a good job, a paid mortgage, a retirement account, an existence so secure and so unremarkable that nothing could disturb it. They were not poor. I want to be clear about that. We were middle class, comfortable. The house was clean. The refrigerator was full. I had clothes and school supplies and a bicycle I rode around the neighborhood. I was not neglected in any material sense. But there's a kind of poverty that has nothing to do with money. It is the poverty of imagination, the poverty of possibility, the poverty of growing up in a house where the future has already been decided and your only job is to fit inside it. I was 6 years old, first grade. I had drawn a picture. It was a building, a tall building with my name on it, Noel's company. I had drawn stick figures going in and out of the front door. I had drawn a sun above it. I had drawn flowers around the base. It was the most detailed drawing I had ever made, and I was proud of it with the kind of full-body pride that only 6-year-olds have. The kind that makes you run. I ran into the kitchen. My father was at the table reading the newspaper. I put the drawing in front of him. Look, Daddy, it's my company. When I grow up, I'm going to have a building with my name on it. He looked at the drawing. He looked at me. He picked up his coffee. That's cute, Noel. But people like us don't own buildings. We work in them. He went back to his newspaper. I stood there, 6 years old, holding a drawing, learning for the first time that my father's world had walls and I was already inside them. My mother was at the sink. She turned around. She looked at the drawing. She looked at my father. She said nothing. She turned back to the sink. I took the drawing to my room and put it in a shoe box under my bed. I didn't throw it away. Even at 6, I understood that throwing it away would mean agreeing with him. Keeping it meant something else. I didn't know what yet, but I knew it meant something else. That drawing is on my office wall now, but I'll get to that. I grew up inside my father's philosophy the way a plant grows inside a pot. It shaped me. It contained me. Every direction I tried to extend in, I hit the walls he had built. And the walls were not dramatic. They were not violent. They were conversational, small, reasonable sounding. The most dangerous limitations are the ones that sound like common sense. When I was 9, I told my mother I wanted to take a coding class at the community center. She said, "Let me ask your father." My father said coding is for people who go to MIT and we're not MIT people. I did not take the coding class. When I was 11, I entered a science fair. I built a project about solar energy. I won second place in the school and qualified for the district competition. My father said, "That's nice, but don't get your hopes up. The district competition is a different level." I went to the district competition. I won first place. I came home with the trophy. My father said, "Well, don't let it go to your head. One win doesn't mean anything." When I was 13, I told my parents I wanted to go to a summer entrepreneurship camp at Marquette University. It cost $400. I had saved $150 from babysitting. I asked if they could cover the rest. My father put down his fork. "Noel, entrepreneurship camp. You know what entrepreneurs are. They're people who gamble with money they don't have on ideas that usually fail. I'm not paying for you to learn how to go broke." My mother was cutting her chicken. She didn't look up. She didn't look at me. She didn't look at my father. She just kept cutting. The sound of the knife on the plate is something I can still hear if I close my eyes. That small scraping. The soundtrack of silence when someone should have spoken. I did not go to entrepreneurship camp. I stayed home that summer and read every business book the public library had. There were 14. I read them all. I took notes in a spiral notebook. I underlined sentences. I dog-eared pages. I built a vocabulary for the thing my father had told me I couldn't be, and I built it in secret the way people build things that aren't allowed. Quietly, persistently, in the margins of a life that was supposed to stay inside the lines. I want to stop here because I need to tell you about my brother and why my brother matters to this story, even though my brother is not the one Forbes is writing about. My brother Caleb is 3 years older than me. He was everything my parents wanted. He was cautious. He was steady. He did not draw buildings with his name on them. He did not enter science fairs or ask for coding classes or request entrepreneurship camp. He followed the path: public school, state university, engineering degree, job at a firm in Milwaukee, apartment, car payment, $401,000. The Raymond Okafor life cycle replicated in the next generation. My parents loved Caleb in a way they did not love me. Or more precisely, they loved Caleb comfortably. Loving Caleb required no adjustment, no recalibration, no reckoning with the possibility that their worldview might be incomplete. Caleb confirmed them. I contradicted them. And in the Okafor household, contradiction was not treated as a sign of intelligence or spirit or individuality. It was treated as a problem. Caleb and I were not enemies. He was not cruel to me, but he was complicit in the way that favored children are always complicit. He accepted the extra warmth without questioning why I got less. He absorbed the approval without noticing the deficit beside him. When my parents talked about their kids, they talked about Caleb's accomplishments and Noel's potential problems. Caleb's good judgment and Noel's impractical ideas. Caleb's stability and Noel's. They never finished that sentence about me. They just let the silence imply whatever the silence implied. High school. This is where the pressure changed from passive to active, from containment to confrontation. I was a sophomore, 15 years old. I had been teaching myself to code for 2 years using free resources online, YouTube tutorials, Khan Academy, Cod Academy. I had a second-hand laptop I bought with babysitting money, and I wrote code the way some kids wrote in journals, constantly, obsessively, as a way of processing a world that didn't have room for me. I built a small web application that helped students at my school organize study groups. Nothing revolutionary, a simple matching tool. You entered your subjects and your availability, and it connected you with other students who needed help in the same areas. I called it StudyLink. 40 students at my school used it within the first month. The school newspaper wrote a small article about it. My computer science teacher, Mr. Devereaux, pulled me aside after class and said, "Noelle, this is genuinely impressive work for someone your age." I went home. I was excited. Not the kind of excited where you jump up and down. The kind where your chest feels like it's expanding. Like there's more room inside you than there was yesterday. I told my parents at dinner, I built an app. 40 kids at school are using it. Mr. Devereaux says it's advanced for my age. My father set down his fork. The fork setting was always the warning. The transition from eating to pronouncing. Noelle, how much time are you spending on this? A few hours after school. And weekends. A few hours. And your grades? I have a 3.7. It was 3.8 last semester. It went down 1/10 of a point, Dad. He looked at me. The look. I knew it so well by then I could draw it from memory. The look that said, I am about to say something for your own good, and your own good happens to align perfectly with my worldview, and challenging it is not an option. This is exactly what I'm talking about. You get distracted by these projects and your fundamentals slip. Nobody is going to hire you because you built a study app in high school. They're going to hire you because you have a degree and a professional track record. Focus on what matters. This matters to me. What matters to you and what matters in the real world are two different things. The sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be. My mother was eating. She was always eating during these conversations. Chewing, swallowing, not looking up. The fork and the plate and the chicken. The holy trinity of my mother's non-involvement. I went to my room. I sat on my bed. I opened my laptop and I looked at StudyLink. 40 users. 40 people whose lives were slightly better because of something I made. And my father's verdict was focus on what matters. I closed the laptop. I opened it again. I wrote code until 2 in the morning. Junior year, I expanded StudyLink to 3 other schools in the Milwaukee area. 200 users. I was managing the platform, fixing bugs, responding to feedback, and maintaining a 3.7 GPA. Mr. Devereaux connected me with a professor at UW Milwaukee named Dr. Ananya Patel, who ran a student technology mentorship program. She invited me to sit in on a Saturday workshop for college students working on tech projects. I walked into that workshop and I felt something shift, like a key turning, like a frequency tuning in. The room was full of people building things, apps, platforms, tools. They were talking about users and interfaces and scalability and market fit. They were talking about the things I had been reading about alone in my bedroom for years. And they were talking about them out loud, in a room, together. Dr. Patel noticed me. She was small, Indian American, wire-rimmed glasses, a voice that was simultaneously gentle and impossible to ignore. She sat next to me during a break. You're the high schooler, StudyLink. Yes, tell me about it. I told her. She listened the way certain people listen, not waiting for their turn to speak, actually listening, processing, waiting. When I finished, she asked me a question nobody had ever asked me before. What's the biggest problem you see in the world that you think technology could fix? I didn't hesitate. People who need help don't know how to find it, and people who can help don't know who needs them. The connection layer is broken. StudyLink fixes it for studying, but the same problem exists everywhere. Healthcare, housing, job training, mental health. People are drowning 3 feet from a life raft because nobody built the bridge between the problem and the solution. She took off her glasses, cleaned them, put them back on. How old are you? 16. She was quiet for a moment. Come back next Saturday. I came back every Saturday for 2 years. Dr. Patel became what my father should have been. Not a cheerleader. Not someone who told me everything I did was perfect. A real mentor. Someone who challenged my ideas and sharpened my thinking and never once told me to be realistic. She told me to be rigorous. That's the difference. Realistic means stop dreaming. Rigorous means dream harder. Dream with precision. Dream with data. Senior year. College applications. The breaking point. I applied to 7 schools, including 2 that offered strong programs in computer science and entrepreneurship. Georgia Tech and Carnegie Mellon. Mrs. Castellano, my guidance counselor, told me my applications were excellent. My grades, my test scores, study link, the mentorship with Dr. Patel, the expansion to 200 users, my personal essay which I wrote about the connection layer problem. I got into 5 of 7. I got into Georgia Tech. I got into Carnegie Mellon. Carnegie Mellon offered me a scholarship that covered 70% of tuition. I told my parents on a Sunday. I had all 5 acceptance letters. I laid them on the dining room table. My mother picked up the Carnegie Mellon letter first. Pennsylvania, she said. That's far. It's one of the best computer science programs in the country, Mom. My father picked up the Georgia Tech letter, then the others. He read them each, slowly, methodically, the way he read everything, accounting for every variable before rendering a verdict. These are good schools, he said. And then he said the thing I knew was coming because it was always coming because it was the only thing he ever said no matter what I put in front of him. But computer science is a crowded field, and entrepreneurship is a fantasy. You'd be better off at UW Milwaukee. Stay local. Get an engineering degree. Something practical. I have a scholarship to Carnegie Mellon, Dad. 70%. What about the other 30? I'll take loans. I'll work. I'll figure it out. He shook his head. The slow, disappointed shake. The shake that said, I am not angry. I am sad for you because you don't see what I see, which is that you are going to fail, Noelle. You're going to graduate with debt for a degree in a field where most people end up working for someone else anyway. You'll spend 10 years paying off loans for a job you could get from UW Milwaukee with no debt. I don't want a job, Dad. I want to build something. He looked at me, really looked at me. And what he said next is the sentence I have carried in my body for 13 years. The sentence that lived in my spine during every hard night and every early morning and every moment when the voice in my head said he was right. It is the sentence that the Forbes photographer doesn't know about, but that was standing in the room when he knocked on that door yesterday. Noelle, you're going to die purchasing something that doesn't exist. And when it happens, don't come back here asking for help because I will have told you so. My mother was in the kitchen. She heard every word. She came to the doorway. She stood there, and she said nothing, not one word. Not let's talk about this. Not Raymond. That's too far. Not Noelle. We'll figure something out. Nothing. The silence of my mother is a sound I know better than any other sound in the world. It is the sound of a woman choosing her husband's certainty over her daughter's possibility. It is the sound of someone deciding in real time that peace in the house is more important than justice for the child. It is the sound that haunts you, not because it's loud, but because it isn't. I went to Carnegie Mellon. I packed my own car. I drove myself to Pittsburgh. My mother hugged me in the driveway. She whispered, "Be safe." My father shook my hand. He shook my hand, like I was a colleague leaving a firm, not a daughter leaving home. Caleb was there. He said, "Good luck, sis." He was 21. He was already working at an engineering firm. He was already inside the pot my father had built. He looked at me through the walls of it, not with malice, not with envy, with the mild confusion of someone watching another person leave a room he can't imagine wanting to leave. Carnegie Mellon is where I became Noelle Okafor, not the girl from the brick split level in Brookfield, not the daughter who drew buildings and was told that people like us don't own them, the actual person. Freshman year was brutal, not because the academics were hard, they were, but because I was carrying the weight of everything I'd left behind. Every night I heard my father's voice, "Die poor." Every morning I had to override it. The override was exhausting. It cost energy I should have been spending on learning, but I spent it on survival instead because before you can learn to build you have to learn to believe that building is allowed. I found the entrepreneurship club in my second week. I walked into a room full of students who talked the way Dr. Patel talked. Systems, markets, scale, impact. They were not people whose parents had told them to be realistic. They were people whose parents had told them to be ambitious. The difference between growing up in a house that says reach and growing up in a house that says stop was visible in every conversation. The reach kids moved through the world with a kind of aerodynamic ease. They didn't waste energy on permission. They spent it all on momentum. I didn't have that ease, but I had something they didn't. I had the engine that gets built when the thing driving you isn't excitement but proof. Not joy but defiance. Not I can do this, but I will show you. It is not the healthiest fuel. My therapist and I have discussed this at length, but it is potent. And in those early years, potency was more important than health. Sophomore year, I met two people who changed everything. The first was Marcus Whitley, computer science major, from Detroit. He had grown up in a house not unlike mine except in his version both parents had left and his grandmother had raised him, and his grandmother, unlike my parents, had told him every single day that he was going to change the world. He believed her. He coded like he believed her, with a fluency and a joy that I envied because my coding had always been fueled by something more complicated than joy. The second was Dr. Christine Harlow, professor of technology and social innovation. She taught a course called Building for Impact that I took spring of sophomore year, and that rewired the way I thought about everything. Dr. Harlow's thesis was this: the most valuable technology companies in the next 20 years won't be the ones that build the most sophisticated products. They'll be the ones that solve the most fundamental connection problems, the gap between need and resource, the distance between a person who is struggling and the system that could help them. I sat in her lecture hall and I heard my own words coming back to me. The connection layer is broken. The thing I had told Dr. Patel at 16. The thing I had been circling since StudyLink. The thing my father had called a fantasy. Dr. Harlow wasn't calling it a fantasy. She was calling it the biggest market opportunity of the century. After class, I went to her office. She was eating an apple and reading a journal article, and she looked up at me with the expression of someone who was used to students showing up unannounced with big ideas. I told her about StudyLink, about the connection layer, about my father. She set down the apple. Your father told you you'd die poor for wanting to connect people who need help with people who can provide it. Yes. She leaned back in her chair. Your father is wrong. And I don't say that lightly because I'm sure he's a smart man. But smart people can have catastrophically bad judgment about the people closest to them. What you're describing isn't a fantasy. It's infrastructure. And the person who builds it won't die poor. They'll build one of the most important companies of their generation. She pulled a folder from her desk. There's a startup accelerator I advise. 3 months, seed funding, mentorship. If you can build a prototype and a team by September, I'll nominate you. I walked out of her office and called Marcus. He answered on the first ring the way he always did. Marcus, I need a technical co-founder. For what? For everything. He paused for exactly 2 seconds. I'm in. We built the prototype in 11 weeks. We called the company Bridgepoint. The concept was the same thing I had been circling since I was 16, but now it had structure. Bridgepoint was a platform that connected individuals in need, people facing food insecurity, housing instability, healthcare gaps, job displacement, with hyper-local resources and service providers. Not a directory, not a static list of phone numbers, a dynamic, intelligent matching system that used real-time data to connect the right person with the right resource at the right moment. Think of it this way. If you are a single mother in a city and your heat gets shut off in January, the current system requires you to know which agency to call, which forms to fill out, which hours they're open, which documents you need. The system puts the burden of navigation on the person least equipped to navigate. Bridgepoint flipped that. You entered your situation and the platform did the rest. It found the resources. It checked eligibility. It connected you with a real person who could help. It followed up. We launched the beta in Pittsburgh. 500 users in the first month. The feedback was overwhelming. Not in the Silicon Valley sense where overwhelming means download numbers. In the human sense, people wrote to us. They called. A woman named Deborah left a voicemail that I still have on my phone. She said, I've been trying to get my son into a reading program for 6 months. I couldn't figure out the system. I put our information into Bridgepoint and 3 days later he was enrolled. She was crying on the voicemail. I listen to it sometimes when I need to remember why the numbers matter. Because behind every number is a Deborah. The accelerator gave us $50,000 in seed funding. We used every cent. We hired 2 more developers. We expanded the beta to 3 cities. By the time I graduated from Carnegie Mellon, Bridgepoint had 12,000 users and was operating in Pittsburgh, Detroit, and Cleveland. I graduated magna cum laude. Dr. Harlow was there. Dr. Patel drove from Milwaukee. Marcus's grandmother flew from Detroit. She sat in the front row in a church hat, and when they called my name, she stood up and shouted, "That's my grandson's partner." The entire section turned to look at her. She didn't care. She had never been embarrassed by volume. My parents did not come. I had sent them an invitation. I had sent it by mail because I knew a phone call would become a conversation, and a conversation would become a lecture about debt and practicality and dying poor. I sent the invitation with a short note: graduating with honors, built a company, 12,000 users, would love for you to be there. My mother called 2 days before graduation. She said, "Your father and I talked about it, and we think it's best if we don't come. It's a long drive and your father has work and..." She trailed off. The trail was familiar. The sound of a woman who has run out of excuses but hasn't run out of compliance. "Okay, Mom, we're proud of you, Noelle. Are you?" "Of course we are." I didn't push it. There was nothing to push against. You can't push against fog. It just moves and reforms, and you're standing in the same place you started. Caleb sent a text. "Congrats on graduating. Heard about the company thing. Sounds interesting. We should catch up sometime." We did not catch up. The next 5 years were the building years. I'm going to move through them efficiently because the story you came here for is not about the climb. It's about the collision at the top. Year 1 post-graduation. Bridgepoint expanded to 10 cities. We raised a series around $4.2 million. The lead investor was a woman named Sandra Voss, who had built and sold 2 companies and who told me during our first meeting that she invested in founders who had something to prove because they built harder than founders who had nothing to lose. Year 2, 30 cities, 85,000 users. We raised a Series B, $18 million. We hired a full-time team of 60. We opened an office in Atlanta, which became our headquarters, because Atlanta was a city that understood what it meant to build something from the margins. Year 3, 100 cities, 400,000 users. Partnership with the Department of Health and Human Services. A feature in Wired magazine. An invitation to speak at South by Southwest, where I stood on a stage and said the future of technology isn't artificial intelligence or blockchain or virtual reality. The future of technology is making sure a mother in Cleveland can find a coat for her kid in January without spending 40 hours navigating a broken system. Year 4, 200 cities, 1.2 million users. Series C, $52 million. The Wall Street Journal ran a profile. The headline was "The Woman Who Built a Bridge." Forbes called. Fortune called. I was on 3 magazine covers in 1 year. Year 5. Bridgepoint crossed the $100 million valuation mark. 2 million users, 38 states, 180 employees. A platform that had connected over 4 million people with resources they needed and couldn't find on their own. Not an app, not a tool, an infrastructure, a bridge. The thing I had drawn at 6 years old. A building with my name on it, people going in and out. During those 5 years, I had minimal contact with my parents. My mother called on my birthday. She texted at Christmas. The calls were short, surface level. "How's the weather in Atlanta? Are you eating enough? Your father says hello." He never actually said hello. She just said he did. I stopped calling home. Not dramatically, not with a declaration. The way you stop watering a plant that isn't growing. Gradually, then completely. The absence of water is only noticeable if someone checks the soil, and nobody in my family was checking. Aunt Francine was my bridge, my mother's sister. She lived in Chicago. She was the one Okafor adjacent person who had always treated me like I was worth listening to. She came to my Carnegie Mellon graduation. She forwarded me my mother's Facebook posts, which occasionally mentioned Caleb's work but never mine. She told me once that my mother had started a sentence at Thanksgiving about Noelle's company, and my father had interrupted with something about the Packers game, and the sentence was never finished. The unfinished sentence. That's what my family gave me instead of support. A lifetime of sentences that started in my direction and were redirected before they arrived. Last year I met my partner Kemi at a conference in Lagos. She was running a nonprofit connecting rural Nigerian communities with healthcare access. We were on the same panel. She argued with me about scalability for 20 minutes in front of 300 people, and I fell in love with her somewhere between her third rebuttal and her closing argument. We had dinner that night. We had breakfast the next morning. We've been together since. Kemi grew up in Ibadan. Her parents are both teachers. When she told them she was starting a nonprofit, her father said, "Tell me what you need." 4 words. 4 words that contained everything my childhood didn't. Not "I believe in you." Not "go change the world." Just "tell me what you need." The assumption embedded in those words is what mattered. The assumption that what she was doing was valid and that her father's role was to support it. I told Kemi about my parents on our third date. I told her about the drawing, the fork setting down, the entrepreneur camp, the $500 my father wouldn't spend, the Carnegie Mellon scholarship, the diaper sentence, the handshake in the driveway. She listened. She didn't flinch. She didn't pity me. She said something that rearranged something in my chest. "You built Bridgepoint to connect people with help they can't find on their own. But you never found that help yourself. You became the bridge because no one built one for you." I looked at her across the table in a restaurant in Lagos, 6,000 miles from Milwaukee, and I understood for the first time that the company wasn't just a product. It was a translation, a conversion of pain into infrastructure. I had taken the connection that was missing in my own life and I had built it for millions of strangers, and in doing so I had made the missing thing useful without ever making it stop hurting. Both things can be true. You can build the bridge and still be standing on the side where nobody came. Now, Forbes. 2 months ago, a journalist named Rachel Kim from Forbes contacted my publicist and said they wanted to do a feature. Not a list, not a blurb, a full-length profile, cover candidate. They wanted to tell the story of Bridgepoint and the story of me. The whole story. I said yes, but I had a condition. "I want the house," I said. "I want a photograph of the house where I grew up. Include it in the piece." My publicist looked at me. "Why?" "Because the story isn't complete without the starting point. People need to see where the bridge begins. And the bridge begins at a brick split level in Brookfield, Wisconsin, where a man told his 6-year-old daughter that people like us don't own buildings." Rachel Kim flew to Atlanta. We spent 3 days together. I showed her the office. I showed her the platform. I showed her Deborah's voicemail. I introduced her to Marcus, who showed her the code architecture and told her about the early days in Pittsburgh when we coded until AM and ate gas station burritos and believed so hard in what we were building that the belief itself felt like food. Then Rachel asked me about my family. I told her everything. The drawing, the science fair, the entrepreneurship camp, the Carnegie Mellon fight, Daipur, the handshake, the silence, all of it. She recorded every word. She asked careful questions. She didn't editorialize. She didn't say, "Your parents sound terrible." She said, "What do you think they were afraid of?" I had never been asked that question. Not by a journalist. Not by a therapist. Not by myself. I thought about it for a long time. They were afraid that if I reached for something extraordinary and failed, the failure would prove that people like us don't belong in those spaces. And the proof would be worse than the never trying. My father would rather I never reached at all than reach and fall and confirm his worst belief about himself, about us, about what we were allowed to want. Rachel nodded slowly. "So when you succeeded?" "When I succeeded, I broke the container. I proved that the belief was wrong. And proving a belief wrong doesn't feel like liberation to the person who held it. It feels like loss. It feels like the story they told themselves for 50 years, the story that kept them safe, that justified every cautious choice, that explained why they never reached, was a lie. And living with a lie you chose is easier than living with a truth your daughter forced you to see." Rachel used that quote in the piece, word for word. The photographer went to Milwaukee on a Tuesday. He knocked on the door at 10 in the morning. My mother in her bathrobe, my father in the hallway. "Your daughter Noelle asked us to include this location." I was not there. I chose not to be. I chose to let the knock speak for me because I had spent 25 years knocking on the doors of my parents' attention and they had never fully opened. Now someone else was knocking. Someone with a camera and a Forbes lanyard and a $100 million story that could not be dismissed with a fork on a plate and a lecture about practicality. The photographer told me later that my father stood in the hallway for a long time after he explained why he was there. He said my father leaned against the wall and looked at the floor. He said my mother sat down on the stairs. He said neither of them spoke for almost a minute. Then my father said, "You can take the photograph." The photographer took 3 shots of the exterior, the brick, the driveway, the front door, the split-level symmetry of a house that looks exactly like every other house on the street. Ordinary, contained, the architecture of a life designed to never be noticed. In the final image, and this was not staged, The photographer told me this happened on its own. You can see the living room window. And in the window, blurred but visible, is a figure, my father, standing at the glass, looking out, not at the photographer, past him, at something in the distance, or at nothing, or at the 25 years of distance between who his daughter was and who he had decided she would be. My mother called me that evening. I let it ring for times. Old habit. Noelle. Hi, Mom. A photographer came today. From Forbes. I know. I sent him. She was quiet for a long time. Your father has been sitting in the living room since the man left. He hasn't turned on the television. I don't think. She stopped. I don't think I've ever seen him like this. Like what? Quiet, but not the usual quiet. A different kind. Like something stopped working inside him and he's trying to figure out what it was. I knew what it was. The story. The 50-year story he had told himself about what people like us could and couldn't do. The story had encountered a fact it couldn't absorb and the system was crashing. The blank screen. The empty display. The silence that comes not from peace but from the catastrophic failure of a framework that can no longer hold. Mom, I'm going to be on the cover of Forbes magazine. I know. The man told us. The company is worth over $100 million. We've connected 4 million people with resources they needed. We have 180 employees. I built this. I built all of it. I built it with no money from this family and no support from this family, and while carrying a sentence that Dad said to me when I was 18 that I have heard in my head every single day since. What sentence? You know what sentence, Mom? She was quiet. He said I would die poor. I know. He said don't come back asking for help, Noelle. And I didn't. I didn't come back. I didn't ask. I built it alone. Every dollar, every user, every city, every sleepless night, every moment when his voice was louder than my own. I built through all of it. My mother was crying. I could hear it. Not the restrained, careful crying of a woman managing her emotions. The uncontrolled kind. The kind that means the container has broken. I need to ask you something, Mom. And I need an honest answer. Not a polite one. Okay? When he said those things to me, when he dismissed the drawing and the science fair and the camp and the scholarship and everything I ever showed you, why didn't you say anything? Why didn't you once, one single time, stand between his words and my heart? The crying got harder. Because I believed him, she said. That's the truth, Noelle. I believed him. I believed that people like us don't own buildings. I believed that dreaming too big was dangerous. I believed it because it was safer to believe it than to fight for something different. And you were fighting for something different. And it terrified me, because if you were right, then I had wasted my entire life being afraid. I let that sit. I let it fill the phone line. I let it travel 800 miles from Milwaukee to Atlanta and land in my chest where it joined every other sentence my parents had ever said to me. The whole collection, the anthology of limitations, all sitting together now in the same drawer as the drawing and the shoebox and the spiral notebook and every book I read in secret and every line of code I wrote alone. Thank you for saying that, Mom. What do we do now? I don't know. Your father wants to talk to you. I'm not ready for that. Okay. I'll call you when I'm ready. But Mom, I need you to understand something. I didn't send the photographer to humiliate you. I sent him because the story starts at that house. Every bridge has two ends. One end is Bridgepoint, 4 million connections, $100 million, the cover of Forbes. The other end is a brick split level in Brookfield where a 6-year-old drew a building with her name on it and was told that people like us don't own buildings. Both ends matter. Both ends are true. And I won't pretend the first end exists without the second one. She was quiet for a long time. I love you, Noelle. I love you to Mom. That doesn't mean this is fixed. It means I'm willing to start. We hung up. My father called 2 days later. I didn't answer. He left a voicemail. His voice was the quietest I have ever heard it. Stripped of authority, stripped of certainty. The voice of a man standing in the rubble of his own philosophy. Noelle, I don't know how to do this. I've never been wrong about something this important and I've never had to say it out loud. I was wrong. About you. About what you could do. About everything. You didn't die poor. You built something I can't even understand. And he paused. I'm proud of you. I should have said that when you were 6. I should have said it at every age after. I didn't and I can't get those years back. But I'm saying it now. I'm proud of you. I listened to the voicemail 3 times. Then I saved it. I put it in the same folder as Deborah's voicemail. The folder is called Voices That Matter. It has 2 files in it now. The Forbes issue comes out next month. The cover photo is me standing on the roof of our Atlanta office. The city behind me. The sky doing something dramatic that the photographer didn't plan but that the editors loved. Inside, the profile. 8 pages. Rachel's writing. The whole story. And on page 4 there is a photograph of a brick split level in Brookfield, Wisconsin. Ordinary. Contained. A house that looks like every other house on the street. And in the living room window, a blurred figure looking out at something he's only now beginning to see. On my office wall there are 3 things. The drawing from when I was 6, purple crayon, a building with my name on it, stick figures going in and out, a sun above. Below the drawing is a framed copy of my father's voicemail transcribed. I had it typeset and printed. His words and his voice made permanent. I'm proud of you. I should have said that when you were 6. And next to both of them, arriving next month, will be the Forbes cover. The girl who drew the building and the woman who built it, side by side. The distance between them measured not in years, but in every sentence that tried to stop her and didn't. I am not reconciled with my parents. We are not healed. We are in the earliest stage of something that might become something or might not. My mother has started therapy. She calls me every week now. Short calls, real calls. She asks about Kemi. She asks about the company. She doesn't give advice. She listens. Listening is new for her. You can hear her learning how to do it in real time. The pauses are longer than they need to be because she's checking herself, making sure the next thing she says isn't a ceiling. My father and I have spoken once since the voicemail, a 15-minute phone call where he asked me to explain what Bridgepoint does. I explained it. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "So you built the thing you drew when you were 6. Not a question, a recognition. Yeah, Dad. I built the thing I drew when I was 6. Another silence. I kept telling you it wasn't possible. You did. And you kept building anyway. I did. Why? Because you were wrong. And I knew it before you did. I knew it at 6 and I knew it at 16 and I knew it at 18 when you told me I'd die poor. I always knew. I just needed enough time and enough distance to prove it." He didn't say anything for a moment. Then, "You get that stubbornness from me, you know." I laughed. I actually laughed. Not because it was funny, because it was the most my father thing my father had ever said, taking credit for the quality that survived his attempts to kill it. Caleb called me last week. First real conversation in years. He said he'd read an early copy of the Forbes article. He said he didn't know. He said he was sorry he never asked. He said his daughter, who is 4, drew a picture of a building yesterday and wrote her name on it. And he put it on the refrigerator. I almost couldn't speak when he told me that. Not because it was sad, because it was the correction happening in real time. A 4-year-old girl in Milwaukee drawing a building with her name on it and her father putting it on the refrigerator instead of next to the trash. The cycle adjusting. The pot getting bigger. The walls getting farther apart. If you are watching this and you drew a building once, if you showed someone a drawing or a plan or a business idea or a piece of yourself and they pushed it toward the trash, if someone told you that people like you don't own buildings, I need you to hear me. They were wrong. Not because they were bad people. Maybe they were scared people. Maybe they were people who had been told the same thing and believed it and never tested it and couldn't bear to watch you test it because your success would mean their belief was a prison they chose to live in. But their fear is not your blueprint. Their ceiling is not your sky. Their no is not your answer. Build the building. Put your name on it. Draw the sun above it. And when the photographer knocks on the door of the place where they told you it wasn't possible, let him take the picture. Not for revenge, for the record. So that the story is complete. So that every kid who draws a building with their name on it knows that the drawing was never the fantasy. The fantasy was the person who said it couldn't be done. My name is Noelle Okafor. I am 31 years old. My company has connected 4 million people with resources they needed. My face is on the cover of Forbes magazine. And the house where my father told me I'd die poor is on page 4. Both pages tell the truth. One page is where the bridge starts. The other is where it leads. And the bridge holds. If this story hit you where it needed to, leave a comment. Tell me about your drawing. Tell me about the person who said it wasn't possible. And tell me what you built anyway. Subscribe if you haven't, because the next story is already written. And it might be the one that finally gives you permission to stop asking for permission. Thank you for being here. I'll see you next time.